I apologize to everybody. I have no idea what happened with that stream. Ms. Cox, I have no idea.
Okay, it was technology.
I have no idea. I'm not sure how to get everybody back. If, I do have it streaming to YouTube again. Can you see it over there?
No, I'm not seeing anything yet. Okay, wait. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So, we're going to try to finish this out, you all. Just bear with me for a few seconds. All right. So where were we? I think this is where we were getting to the math section. And so we're back on process of elimination strategies. Hopefully some more people will be able to jump back on. If not, Ms. Cox, we'll just, we'll have to try and do this again. But for those of you that are still on, so I talked to you, I covered the first 3 steps of the math aspect of the ACT, reading the problem, asking yourself 3 questions, and then setting up your equation. So now we're at step 4. And step 4 is all about process of elimination strategy. So there are 2, back solving and plugging in your own numbers. So for the sake of time, so we've got the first one is back solving. So if you look on the ACT math, the math section has 5 answer choices. So we want to use this to our advantage. So simply what's going to happen, the equation that you've set up on step 3, you're going to want to take one of the 5 answer choices, and then you want to put it inside of the equation. Now, the reason we want to do this is because we're trying to test to see if that answer choice works. Remember, we're trying to get rid of the wrong answers first. So the first thing we're going to do is take one of those answers and we're going to plug it into the problem. Now, we're not going to just take any answer. We're going to start right in the middle with answer choice C or H, which is in the middle. So that's going to give us 2 answers above C or H, and it's going to give us 2 answers below. Once you plug in C or H, that answer is either going to be correct or incorrect. If it satisfies the equation, then we know it's right, and we're going to move forward. But if it does not satisfy the equation and it is incorrect, and it is incorrect, then what we want to do is look at the other answer choices remaining, because the incorrect answer is either going to be too big or too small. If it's too big, then we look for the other two answer choices that are bigger than that particular answer, and we eliminate those. If it's too small, we look for the two smaller answer choices. So in a sense, by starting with C or H, we're looking to get rid of 3 incorrect answers. If we're able to get rid of 3 incorrect answers, then all we have to do is choose one of the remaining 2 and plug it into the equation to see if it works. All right. So this is real simple. Many of you have seen this and done this before. All right, but we got to be very deliberate in using it on the ACT. So plug in one of the 5 answer choices, start with C or H. We're going to plug it in. If it's correct, we mark it. If it's incorrect, we look for the 2 other answer choices that fit the same criteria, that are too big or too small, and then we plug in one of the remaining 2. So what does that look like? We do this on an ACT practice question or test. So we go back to our previous equation about the 200 technicians, and we've already got it set up. Women plus men equal 200. And we're trying to find out how many women attended the conference. So basically what we're going to do is the strategy says we're going to start in the middle with C, and we're going to take 100 and we're going to add it. We're going to plug it in everywhere we see W. So we end up with 100 plus 130, and that equals to 230. Does 230 equal 200? The answer is no. So 100 gives us an answer that is too big. If that's the case, now we can get rid of C, D, and E, because D is 115 and E is 170. Those answers are too big. Now all we have to do is go back and choose one of the remaining 2 and plug it in. So we're going to use 85. And if we go 85 plus 85 plus 30, that gives us 85 plus 115, and 85 plus 115 is 200. 200 equals 200. So our correct answer would be B. So the goal again, we start in the middle, we plug it into where we see the variables, we test it out. We found out that 100 yielded us a large answer, so we got rid of D and E as well. We went back and we chose one of the remaining 2. That's all back solving involves. All right. Using the answer choices to our advantage. Now, the second process of elimination is all about plugging in your own numbers. Now, you can use your own numbers when you have variables in the problems, variables in your answer choices, or you see phrases like in terms of. So whenever you see one of these 3, or you may see a combination of the 3, you can use your own numbers. Now, it's important to remember that you want to use good numbers. And what do we mean by good numbers? Avoid using big numbers and avoid using 0 and 1, because those can be misleading. Again, if you use big numbers, now you got to use the calculator. And that's not what we want to do. We want to use something that is going to be simple, that we can do within the allotted time that we have. So what does that look like? We're going to go back to our example. If the sum of 3 consecutive even integers is P, then in terms of P, what is the least of the 3 integers? We have our equation. Integer 1 plus integer 2 plus integer 3 is equal to P. So we got to substitute our own numbers for N1, N2, and N3. We're going to use 4, 6, and 8 because they are 3 consecutive even integers. When we add them together, we get P is equal to 18. So now we're trying to find out which of these answer choices is going to yield us the least of the 3. So the least of the 3 is 4. So what do we do then? We now, since we have 18, we know what P is. We come and start with the third answer choice. What is 18 divided by 3? Gives us 6. Well, that yields 6 is not the least of those 3 integers. So that means we can get rid of D and E as well because they are going to yield something that's greater. Now we have to do is pick between A and B. 18 minus 6 is 12. 12 divided by 3 is equal to 4. So our answer is going to be A. So in this particular problem, we actually use both process of elimination strategies. The first was we had to plug in our own numbers to find out what P was. All right, so we got 4, 6, and 8. You could have used 2, 4, and 6. You could have used 8, 10, and 12 as long as they are 3 consecutive even integers. Once we identify what P was, we then turned around and we used the second process of elimination. We used back solving. We started with C. We plugged in 18 everywhere where we had a P, and then we went through and we got rid of 3 answer choices on the front end, and it left us with 2 answer choices to choose from, and we used A. So those 2 particular strategies, back solving and plugging in your own answers, are things that you can use to systematically approach each of the questions to ACT math. Now, in addition to knowing those strategies, it's also good to know a few formulas. And here's some formulas that you should know. The area of a triangle, the Pythagorean theorem. You got a couple of special triangle rules that you probably want to know. The area of a square, a rectangle, area of a trapezoid. And then you have, again, area triangle, the Pythagorean theorem. Knowing these formulas are things that can help you on the test. Remember, I said you got to ask yourself 3 questions. What is the problem looking for? What am I missing? And what do I already know? Formulas are things that you already know. And these are things that you can use to help solve some of those problems on the ACT math. And as an example, I have a problem here in the picture below. ABCD is a rectangle. If the area of the triangle triangle ABE is 40, what is the area of the rectangle? So remember, what is it looking for? It wants the area of this entire rectangle. What is missing? We don't know what this length of this side is. We don't know the length of AD. But what do we know? We know the area of this particular triangle is 40. We know the height of this triangle is 8, but we also know that a portion of AD is equal to 4. We also know some formulas. So the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Well, if that's the case, we have 40 is equal to 1/2 base times height. And let me write this a little bit cleaner. We've got 40 is equal to 1/2 base times height. Well, we don't know what this base is, but we do know the height. So the height is 8. And once we do our math, 40 is equal to 4b, and b is equal to 10. All right. So now we got this side is equal to 10. And once we add 10 and 4, we got AD is equal to 14. Now we can find the area of the rectangle. And the area of a rectangle is simply base times height. And that area is going to be 14 times 8. And when we multiply, that gives us 112. So the answer is E. In this particular instance, we did not use a process of elimination strategy. We relied more on the formulas that we knew. And once we identified those formulas, we could solve this problem in a straightforward manner. But it is important that these are things that you apply, things that you already know. So basic area of a triangle, basic area of a rectangle, you can use those things to help you with your math problems. So how do you get through the math section? You get through the math section in this manner. There are 60 questions, you got 60 minutes. So that means you got a minute per question. If you do that, you won't have any time for review. So instead of using the full 1 minute, we want to use 50 seconds to answer those questions. If you use 50 seconds to answer the questions, you'll shift 10 seconds to the end for review. What does that look like when you implement that as a full strategy? You end up answering 12 questions every 10 minutes. And if you do that, you end up answering all 60 questions in 50 minutes. And if you've answered all 60 questions in 50 minutes, you have essentially given yourself 10 additional minutes to review questions that you have guessed on. Remember, those questions that you have guessed on are probably some that you've never seen before. So, or a couple of those due later questions. And those are the only ones you want to go back and review. So when you get to the math section of the test and they say you have 5 minutes remaining, essentially you should be 5 minutes into your review process of the math section. You have to practice pacing yourself to do your 60 math questions and answer them in 50 minutes and then using 10 minutes for review. So how do you do this on a daily basis? Again, dedicate 1 hour, 1 hour to your math prep. You want to set your timer based on the timing strategy. So again, you're going to set 10 minutes to answer 12 math problems. Initially, you may start out by just setting your timer to 50 seconds to make sure you can get comfortable doing one problem. And the more comfortable you get, then you want to move up and say, let me do a set of 12. In doing your set of 12, make sure you use the 5 steps to answer the math questions. Read the problem, ask 3 questions, set up your equation, use the process of elimination, and finally answer the question. Make sure you mark and move. So those questions that are due never, or it's probably some due later, guess on those, put your special notation, come back and review those during your review time. Make sure you answer all your questions. Once you're done, go through, find the ones that are correct, then multiply times 5. So if every 12 questions you're getting 6 times 5 is 30. You're right on track to get in at 21 on the math section. But it's important, those that you miss, especially those that you should get correct, go back, identify where you made the mistake, identify the area for improvement, and then find you some additional problems in that area. Always answering the questions under the time constraints. If you do that, you won't have a problem getting to a 21 on the ACT math. All right. So we got 2 more sections. And this is all about navigating the ACT reading. And then we got science. And we'll be done with this session. So if we get to the ACT reading, it's real simple because this is not about anything you have to read and remember. Remember, this is an open book test, so you're going to be able to interact. You're going to be able to underline, circle words. You're going to be able to do all of those things on your ACT test. But there are 4 steps to answering those reading questions and positioning yourself to get a 21. Remember, we at least need to get 20 to 22 questions right to get a 21 on the reading section. Excuse me. So what is that? How does that look? How do you position yourself? Step 1, always begin with your strongest passage. So as you practice, you're going to be able to figure out which passage type you're getting the most questions correct. Once you identify it, that's the passage you want to start with. And so that may be passage 3 when you get to the test. Go to passage 3. Make sure you answer those questions first. Step 2, identify the question type and the difficulty. Some of those questions are real straightforward. You should be able to get them right. Some of them cause you to have to review the passage as a whole, and it may be a little bit more difficult. You may want to do those last. Step 3, process of elimination. Refer to the passage if necessary. Again, we want to find the answers that are incorrect first to make sure we're getting the best answer, which is step 4. So after we've eliminated all of the wrong answers, we want to be able to choose the best answer for the question. Because remember, the reading section is asking you for the best question. All right, hold 1 second. We need the link. All right, so the reading section is asking you to choose the best answer for the question. If you don't know, it's no problem with guessing. Remember, guessing is okay. So step 1, start with your strongest passage. Step 2, identify your question type and the difficulty. Step 3, use the process of elimination. Step 4, choose the best answer to the question. So in identifying your type of passage that you are strongest in, ACT gives you 4 types of passages: prose fiction, social sciences, humanities, natural science. Now, the only way you will know which one is your strongest suit is to take several practice tests. You have to take several practice tests. So you won't get it after just one. So if you take about 4 or 5 practice reading tests, and once you get through those tests, you find out that social sciences, every time you do a social science passage, you're getting 7 questions correct. And then you notice every time you do a natural science question, you're getting 6 questions correct. Prose fiction, you may be getting 5 questions. Humanities, you may only be getting 4 questions correct. If that's the case, if this happens over and over and over again, what you want to do is say, when you get to the test, I know I'm starting with social sciences first. Then I'm going to go find the natural science. Then I'm going to go do prose fiction. And then I'll do humanities last. It doesn't matter which 20 to 22 questions you get correct. The goal is to get 20 to 22 questions correct. So if that means you get social science, the majority of them in social sciences, that's what we want to do. Put yourself in the best possible position to get the score you want, because you don't have to go in the order of the passages. Now, keep in mind, you don't want to jump questions between passages. So if you start with social sciences, answer all 10 of those questions first. Then you move on to your natural science, answer all 10 of those questions. But this only happens if you take several practice tests with reading. Don't try to commit anything to memory. You want to be active with your reading. So what do we mean about being active with your reading? Active with your reading simply means write in the book, make special notations, make marks. It's an open book test. I also like to call it the ability, I don't want to call it cheating, but you can use what's at your disposal. So the first thing you want to always do is read a little blurb that's at the top. It's located at the top of the passage. That's where you're going to find out exactly what type of passage it is and what it's about a little bit. Maybe some important details right in that little blurb. Once you read that blurb, you're next moving to reading that passage. That's about 1,000 words in each of those passages. So you got to be able to read rather quickly. So what are we doing? We want to take 3 minutes to read that passage. But how do we want to read it? Underline the first sentence in each paragraph because that's the main idea. Underline and circle some key words because those may be some supporting details. But also write notes in the book, create identifiers, create places you can go to find answers. Because this is going to help you position yourself to get the answers correct. It's important that you pay attention to what we have right here. All correct answers are directly supported by the passage. So that means you don't have to think, there's no trick. Every question has a support right there in the passage. You just have to be able to go and find that support. So don't try to commit this stuff to your mind, to your memory. What you want to do is engage in active reading. So as you are at home and you are practicing, getting prepared, and you read your passage, make sure your passages should have underlines. You should have words circled. You should have special notations. It should literally be marked up. You are encouraged to write in your ACT book. If you do this, when you get to certain questions, you won't have to think about where to look. You already have those things set up. So you got 3 types of reading questions. Some of the questions tell you to get the answer. So you're going to do those first. You go directly to where the question is telling you to go. So it may tell you line 6 through 10. Go through lines 6 through 10. As a matter of fact, go from lines 5 through 11. They're going to tell you exactly where you need to go. So these are easy questions. You should do them first. You can find the support because it's telling you where to go. So it's going to ask you about the passage. It gives you a specific line number, phrase, or paragraph. The second type of question asks you to analyze based on some given information. So they're going to say X, Y, Z. You're going to need to be able to go into the passage somewhere where you may have underlined that first sentence, and it's going to give you a support, and you'll be able to answer the question. And then the final type of question is a big picture question that asks you about the passage as a whole. Now, after you have read that passage over and over, after you have answered the questions, by the time you finish answering the questions, you would have read the passage in its entirety several times. And so at this point, you should be able to answer the big picture question. But it's the hardest type, so you may want to do it last. But these are just 3 types of questions that you're going to get. It's either going to tell you where to go, it's going to ask you to analyze based on some given information, or it's going to ask you about the big picture of that passage. These questions are designed and set up for you to be able to go find the support necessary to get the answer correct. So how do you determine your order of difficulty? Again, once you are inside of the passage and you got those 10 questions, I would answer all of the questions that talk about a specific word or a sentence. If it's telling me a specific place to go, if it's giving me a specific word, answer those questions first because those are the easiest questions. They're very specific. But you start to get over here into these reasoning questions, and you see words such as imply, suggest, or infer, or start asking you about a paragraph or asking you about the entire passage. Those are some more difficult and general type questions, and you want to say those to the end. So again, I'm not telling you to do a science, a prose fiction passage and answer question 1, 2, 4, and 5, and then skip the rest of them. What I'm telling you is if question 1, 2, 4, and 5 say go to lines 6 through 10 or talk about this word, you answer those first. And then you answer the other questions in the passage accordingly. We're simply trying to get ourselves to 21 to 22 correct questions. And if we can do that, then we're in a position to get a 21. So how do you do this? You only have 35 minutes to read those 4 passages and answer those 40 questions. So that's about 8 minutes and 45 seconds. What we want to do is use 8 minutes. 3 of those minutes we want to use to read the passage. And then 5 minutes we want to use to answer 10 questions. So that means we should be answering 2 questions every minute. After we have read the passage, we should be answering 2 questions every minute. If you do that, you shifted 45 seconds to the end for review. What does that look like? You simply end up using 32 minutes to read and answer all of your questions. And you're going to have 3 minutes shifted for review. So this is a little different than the math and the English. In the English, you have 5 minutes. In the math section, you have 10. In the reading, you're only going to have 3 minutes shifted for review. But that's fine because the majority of those questions you should be able to answer simply because it's going to tell you exactly where to go to find the answer or to find the support. So we only want to use those 3 minutes for some of those big picture general type questions, questions that you may have guessed on. Now, remember, it's easy to identify the questions you've guessed on because you should have the same answer choice and it should have a special mark beside it. So implementing this strategy, sitting down, taking a practice test, you're going to be able to answer those questions in 32 minutes and use 3 minutes for a review. So again, as I've given you with the math and the English, how do you do this on a daily basis? 1 hour, simulate the test environment. So basically you're going to set just 35 minutes. You're going to do 35 minutes. Always start out with 1. So take 1 passage and set it for 8 minutes. Use the 3, the 5, and 45 seconds. 3 minutes to read, 5 minutes to answer, 45 seconds for review. Go through, find all of the questions that you got correct, multiply times 4. So now this is where it gets real interesting. If we have to get 20 to 22 questions right, that means we need to be getting 5 questions right out of 10. So 5 out of every 10, 5 times 4 is 20. That gives us 20 questions. If you get 6 questions for each passage, 6 times 4 is 24. So now you're in a position to get above a 21 on that reading section. So you need to at least get 50 to 60% of your questions right for each passage. If you do that, you won't have a problem getting to a 21 on that reading segment. And as always, identify your strengths and your areas for improvement. So the way you improve on reading is to take multiple practice tests, identifying which passage you're the strongest in, understanding the order of difficulty, making sure you use the process of elimination to get rid of the wrong answers, and then choosing the best answer that is left. And you'll be able to get through reading. Now, believe it or not, science works the same as the reading. Science works the same as the reading. It too is 35 minutes and there are 40 questions and you're given passages. So how do you position yourself to get those questions right on the science? First thing, determine your passage type. You got to figure out which of those science passages you are getting the most answers correct during your practice. Step 2, skim the passages. Use that active reading strategy. Underline some key things. Identify keywords. Circle key variables. Step 3, review your charts and graphs. We've all been exposed to tables. We've all been exposed to some charts and graphs. We got to review those charts and graphs. Then step 4, make sure you are reading the question correctly so you can find out exactly what they're looking for. And then step 5 is all about using the process of elimination to get rid of the incorrect answers and then ultimately choosing the best answer that is left. So these are 5 steps that you can use for every science question. But you got to figure out which type of science passage you're strongest in. You got to make sure you are using active reading, marking in that book. Make sure you understand what the chart or the graph is asking you, or is giving the type of information you are being asked to assess. Appropriately and properly read those questions, and then use the process of elimination to get rid of the incorrect answers. And then, of course, choose the best answer that's remaining. So what types of passages are on the science test? Well, there are 3 types. Data representation, those are your charts and graphs. Research summary, you got a couple of experiments. And then you got conflicting viewpoints, where you may have two scientists, and they've got 2 different ways of thinking, 2 different hypotheses, 2 different theories. And you're going to see, and you're going to be asked and challenged to analyze their viewpoints and find the appropriate answers that match or support those viewpoints. So honestly, the conflicting viewpoint is probably the most difficult. So we can go ahead and decide that this is one that we're going to do last. The data representation, charts and graphs, these are pretty straightforward. So you may do those first. The experiments, research summaries are some that you do later. But again, this is totally up to you. As you go through your practice, you may find that the research summary experiment type passages are where you're most successful. So come test day, that's where you want to start. And then you move accordingly. But the goal is to get to 20 to 22 questions. So it doesn't matter which 20 to 22 questions you get right, as long as we get 20 to 22 questions right. Now, as far as the types of questions, if you look, these are the same types of questions that were on the reading section. So get the answer. It's going to tell you where to go. Look at table so-and-so. Look at chart 1B. So if it's telling you where to go, make sure you go to that particular place to find the support you need for the answer. Second type is going to ask you to analyze based on some information. And then the final type of question is the generalization and conclusion. The overall passage, the most difficult, probably one that you will do never. And remember what we say about do never. We guess. So it is important to use that guessing strategy. Take that letter that you've already decided and put a special mark beside it. And now when it's time for review, you can know where to go back and analyze. So it's important that you practice so you can decide and determine which passage type you need to do first, and then which types of questions you need to do first inside of each passage type. So when you looking at those charts and graphs, remember, we're going to read the passage. So those are some words. We got to be able to identify and understand what those passages are saying. But when we get to the charts and the graphs, you got to ask yourself 3 questions. What are the variables? So, they generally have a legend. So you're going to be able to identify what those variables are. Then number 2, how are they measured? Are they measured in grams, quarts, or percentages? And then number 3, what is the graph trying to tell you? So you got to be able to look at this graph and interpret and decide, what is it telling you? Is it telling you something is increasing as another variable decrease? Is it telling you that something stays the same? You've got to be able to interpret what that graph is telling you. So if you look, these are some examples So this particular bar chart over here, this table, this bar chart is talking about plants for sun and shade. And if we look, the variables are talking about sun exposure, and it's also measuring a growth rate. So it's giving you a growth rate and sun exposure for some plants, and it's giving you the different types of plants at the bottom. So your goal will be able to look and see what's the correlation between the sun and the growth rate. If we look over at this table, it's talking about strain of end fruit. So it's giving you the strand, it's giving you an SY medium, it's giving you a few other things. So you would have to go and read this passage and then go and look at this table and be able to read strand in. It's telling you what's the percentage of sugar, what's the percent killed yeast, and it's giving you average lifespan in days. So you've got to be able to read and interpret what these types of charts and graphs are telling you. So how do you do this? There'll be 6 or 7 passages. Again, 40 questions, 35 minutes. And while this is not exact, this gives you an estimate of how much time you should use for each passage type. The conflict and viewpoint is the most difficult, so it's going to require the most time. Research summary requires a minute less. And then data representation, those charts and those tables, because they're so straightforward, it's going to require the least amount of time. So 4 minutes. So the more of these data representation type passages you can get done, the more questions, the more likelihood you are to get to the number of questions you want to get a 21. So what does it look like? You're going to use 32 minutes total to read and answer those 40 questions. And then you will use 3 minutes that you have shifted to the end for review. So this is just like the reading. 32 minutes to read and answer, 3 minutes shifted for review. So in a sense, when they say 5 minutes remaining on the reading and the science section, you really will still be into the answering period. So you'll have about 2 minutes of that 5 minutes where you're going to be winding down your answers. And then the final 3 minutes you will use to review those questions that you have guessed on. Every day, what do? Simulate the test environment just like you do for any of the other sections. Set your timer based on that passage type. So if it's conflicting, 6 minutes. If it's research summary, 5 minutes. If it's data representation, 4 minutes. What you want to do is complete each type of passage, engage in active reading, use those 5 steps to answering the science questions. Go and identify which ones are correct, and you're going to be able to project. So if you get 4 questions, and if there's 6 passages on your science practice test, 4 times 6 is 24, you got 21. If there's 7 passages, 4 times 7 is 28. So you got way more than enough to have a 21. Remember, you're always looking to identify your strengths and areas for improvement. So every time you're practicing, you should be getting stronger and stronger. You should be getting closer and closer to identifying the type of passage that's going to put you in this place to be most successful. Do those first, then the next type second, and the type of passage that you get the most difficulty from, you do it last. All right, so that's it for the English, math, science, and reading. You have everything you need to be successful on that test. I also recommend a few additional resources for the math section. You can use the ACT math workout book. It's a real nice systematic way of identifying the topics that are on the math section of the ACT and working from a perspective of what is absolutely necessary that you need to know to get to the 21. Some things you don't need to worry about. So if you don't know trigonometry, don't worry about trigonometry. All right. The next thing is the official ACT prep guide, 21-22 edition. It's got some retired ACT tests in there. It's 6 full-length tests in this book. There's some online resources as well. I highly recommend that you get this book and use it for your daily strategy sessions. Take 1 or 2 of these tests and use for your daily strategy sessions, and then use the remaining tests to do full-fledged test simulation. You can also get the Preparing for the ACT 21-22 practice test, and you can download it at act.org. And also, additionally, that I have a Pathway to 21 masterclass. It's got some pre-recorded videos. So some of this stuff I've already done is sitting in a pre-recorded, sitting in an online platform. It's already recorded. There is a fee associated with getting access to it, but you can find that at www.josephkmckee.com. Then you can have access to those recordings, to some practice information and things of that nature. And a couple other things before we close out. Your plan of practice. You can do as much practice as you want, but I recommend that you spend at least 1 hour a day. Once you've gone through each section, if you've gotten yourself comfortable with each section, it's going to be time to put it all together. And so basically what you want to do is you want to be able to, an hour a day, you want to do 8 minutes for English, 10 minutes for math, 8 minutes for reading, and then based on your science passage, set the allotted time. Always score and evaluate your answers, because you want to see if you're on track to get the number of questions right you need to. Remember, 49 to 51 for English, 30 to 32 for math, 20 to 21 for reading, and 20 to 22 for science. We always trying to track to see if we're on pace to get those questions. Always look to identify those strengths. And those questions that you get incorrect, go back and go through those steps. Go through each area and go through those steps. Find out where you made your mistake, and then see if you can get it correct the next time.
Mr. McKee, we have one question. Someone wants to know if the first book for math, can you purchase it online?
Yes, you can get it. I got it through Amazon. So you can get it through Amazon. Again, it's the ACT math workout. And again, the thing that I like about it, and you probably can't see it, but it gives you instructions on how to use this book. It tells you what concepts you need to focus on. So some concepts aren't for everybody. Remember I said there's math for everybody, math for some, and math for a few. Well, this book does a great job of showing you. So if you're trying to get a 15 to 25, it's going to tell you what concepts you need to look for, which ones you need to review. If you're trying to get a 26 to 30, it's going to give you some additional concepts. And if you're trying to get above a 30, it's going to tell you those other concepts you need to focus on. But for all intents and purposes, most of us are trying to get from a 15 to a 25. So we need to focus in those areas, get proficient, practice, and then you'll be able to get to where you want to go. So some final thoughts. And I know I just gave you that math book, but remember, you can't really study content for the ACT. You can prepare for it. So set your score goal. For this workshop, we're talking about a 21. Be consistent with your prep. So we're talking about 1 hour daily. Apply the LAB approach. Learn, apply, and build. Learn something every day, apply it during practice, and then you build upon it. Take at least 2 practice tests. All right. Then review and continue. And most importantly, relax. I believe everybody can get to a 21. Don't put any unnecessary pressure on yourself. Just be consistent in your approach to how you prepare. That's important. How you prepare is going to really determine how you perform. So I believe everybody is good to go. Here's my contact information. If you need additional assistance, you can contact me at 662-579-8934. And then this is my email address. All right, Ms. Cox.
Okay.
We were able to get through it. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulty. I did not know that would happen. I apologize for that. And hopefully, the next time around, we won't have those issues.
Yes, again, thank you, Mr. McKee, and thank you for those of you that came back to continue the workshop. Again, like Mr. McKee stated, we apologize for the technical difficulties. And are we going to reschedule again, Mr. McKee?
Yeah, I know there's a test that's coming up here in February. There is, and what I'm going to do, there's another ACT prep, a boot camp that I know that's going to be happening starting in February. And it's designed to assist people to get prepared for that April test. It's not me per se, but there's somebody that's a certified ACT prep instructor. It's going to be free. I'm going to get that registration information, and I highly recommend that everybody sign up for that particular training as well. She's going to be doing it in February, starting on Sundays. It's going to meet once a week on a Sunday afternoon. But she's going to be going into a little bit more in-depth things with some practice problems, some additional strategies. So I will get that to you, and then we can share that out as well.
Okay.
So, but I do thank you all for taking the time and coming back, and hopefully you all got something from this session today.
All right. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. You have a good day too.
All right. Stop the stream.